winner is... Oh, wait a minute. Hold everything. Deanna Ross for Lady Sings the Blues.
81 and is still relevant in the industry. The incomparable Diana Ross, in a surprising twist, has finally revealed 5 stars she had friction with, and possibly might have felt off for a time. The guessing and rumors are over because, after decades of whispers and side eyes, she's setting the record straight. Sit back tight, because few of the names might shock you. Diana Ross versus Mary Wilson. The Supremes may have been the most glamorous and successful girl group of the 60s, but behind the sequins and polished harmonies lay one of Motown's most enduring rivalries, the quietly bitter and long-running feud between Mary Wilson and Diana Ross. At the heart of it all, ego, ambition, and the unshakable feeling that the spotlight was never big enough for both of them. For years, Mary Wilson carried herself with quiet dignity, the loyal friend and reliable voice in the background, while Diana Ross basked in center-stage glory. But Wilson's patience had limits, and as Motown's success skyrocketed, so did Ross's ego, or at least, that's how Wilson saw it. The tension wasn't just personal, it was structural. Berry Gordy, the mastermind of Motown and Ross's romantic partner at the time, made it increasingly clear who his star was. Ross got the solos, the best gowns, and eventually, the name. By 1967, the Supremes had been rebranded as Diana Ross and the Supremes. That wasn't just a branding shift. For Mary Wilson, it was the final slap in the face. Many fans still ask, was it necessary to single out Diana like that? The Supremes were, after all, a group. Mary had been there from the beginning, had weathered every lineup change, and was just as much a founding member as Ross. Yet, she was often written off as the other one, a background fixture in her own story. That didn't sit well with her, and it probably shouldn't have. The worst part? Ross didn't seem to care. In fact, to many observers, she appeared to lean into her solo trajectory with barely a backward glance. By the time she left the group in 1970 to pursue a solo career, Motown had already molded her into a singular star. Mary was left to hold the pieces of the Supremes together with a revolving door of replacements, and a career that would never quite recapture the golden years. To fans of Mary, it looked like Ross had leapt out of the limo while it was still moving, with little regard for who got run over in the process. Mary didn't stay quiet. In her memoir, Dream Girl, My Life as a Supreme, she pulled the curtain back on years of slights, favoritism, and professional disrespect. Some readers found her brutally honest. Others thought she was just bitter. But one thing was clear. Her perspective filled in the gaps left by Ross's more curated public image. While Diana portrayed herself as a trailblazer who carried Motown into the mainstream, Mary laid bare the toll that ambition had taken on those around her. Even in later years, reunions were tense. The 2000 Return to Love tour, which was supposed to be a triumphant reunion of the original Supremes, was mired in controversy. Wilson reportedly rejected the initial offer due to unequal pay compared to Ross, and the tour proceeded with Wilson left out. That tour bombed, plagued by low ticket sales and bad press, perhaps poetic justice, depending on how you see it. Diana Ross has rarely addressed Mary Wilson's criticisms head-on. She's more likely to keep things vague, polished, and rooted in nostalgia. But Mary's accounts, backed by years of first-hand experience, challenge the rosy narrative. And maybe that's why they sting so much. Because they hint at a star who rose by stepping on those closest to her. Both women left legacies. Diana Ross, the icon with her own empire. Mary Wilson, the the truth teller, the survivor who kept the Supremes alive after the headlines faded. But the gap between how they are remembered and how they treated each other says a lot about the price of fame. For some, Ross shines too brightly. For others, Mary Wilson was the quiet heart of a group that was never meant to have just one voice. We're not done with the group. The next one came from the Supremes too, and the story may be disappointing for the fans. Florence Ballard. Before all the glitz, there was Florence Ballard, a founding member with a powerhouse voice and an irreplaceable presence in the group's early years. What many people don't know, or choose to forget, is that Florence was slowly edged out of the spotlight, ultimately forced out of the group she helped build. The circumstances surrounding her departure in 1967 remain deeply controversial, and for many fans and historians, there's a lingering sense that Diana Ross played a bigger role in Florence's downfall than she ever publicly admitted. The dynamic between Florence Ballard and Diana Ross became tense as the group rose to fame. In the early days, Florence was actually considered the lead singer. She had a strong, soulful voice and a confidence that helped shape the Supremes' identity. But Motown's founder, Berry Gordy, had other plans. He saw Diana Ross as the face of the group, with her softer, more pop-friendly voice and camera-ready looks. Slowly, Florence was pushed to the back, both figuratively and literally. Her solos were cut, her mic turned down, and her role diminished while Ross was pushed forward. Many close to the group say Diana didn't just passively accept this treatment, she embraced it. There were whispers that she enjoyed the spotlight a little too much and didn't do much, if anything, to defend Florence as her role shrank more and more. What stings most for a lot of people is how Diana Ross seemed to act like Florence's struggles weren't her problem. Florence battled depression and alcoholism, much of it stemming from the frustration and heartbreak of being sidelined. Instead of supporting her old friend, Diana seemed more focused on rising to solo superstardom. Some reports say that Ross distanced herself as Florence's behavior became erratic, even if much of that behavior was a cry for help. And let's be real, Ross had serious influence at Motown, thanks to her relationship with Gordy. If she had wanted to keep Florence in the group, she likely could have used her power to help. But she didn't. Whether that's because she didn't care, didn't want the competition, or simply wanted to move on, fans saw it as a betrayal. Even today, Diana Ross denies having a hand in Florence's removal, but the bitterness still lingers. Florence's departure wasn't handled with compassion. It was abrupt and humiliating. One night she was a Supreme. The next she was gone, replaced by Cindy Birdsong. She tried to sue Motown, tried to relaunch her career, but the damage had been done. While Ross went on to superstardom, Florence's life spiraled downward. She died in 1976 at just 32, broke and largely forgotten by the industry she helped shape. Many fans, especially those who idolized Florence, hold Diana partially responsible. Not just because she rose as Florence fell, but because she never truly acknowledged the cost of her rise, the role she may have played, and the pain Florence went through as she was cast aside. The story of Florence Ballard is tragic, not just because of what she lost, but because of how preventable it all seemed. And for a lot of people, Diana Ross's silence, or worse, her denial, makes it feel like she never really cared what happened to the friend she once harmonized with on Detroit street corners. Whether she meant to or not, Ross became a symbol of ambition without loyalty, fame without friendship. And that's a tough legacy to forget. Berry Gordy. A complicated resentment toward a friend, Diana Ross owes a lot to Berry Gordy. That's just a fact. Without Gordy, there's a good chance the world might never have known the magic of the Supremes or the powerhouse solo career that followed. But if you think that means Ross looks back at him with only gratitude, you'd be dead wrong. The story of Diana Ross and Berry Gordy isn't just about two people in love. It's about the tangled mess that happens when someone controls your career, your image, and your life, all while pretending it's for your own good. Gordy, the mastermind behind Motown, saw something in Ross early on. He pushed her to the front of the Supremes, sidelining Florence Ballard and Mary Wilson in the process. That was the first red flag for a lot of people, especially inside the group. To some, it looked like favoritism, a romantic relationship turned business agenda. And let's be real, it wasn't just business for Gordy. He was obsessed with making Ross a star, not just within Motown, but as a crossover pop icon. He saw her as elegant, poised, and marketable. But Ross didn't get to where she was just because of Gordy's vision. She worked, she fought, she delivered, and yet Gordy often took the credit. Behind the scenes, things got messier. Gordy had a tight grip on Ross's image, sound, and path. He made calls not just as her boss, but as someone who had intimate access to her vulnerabilities. That dual role, lover and puppet master, blurred every possible line. Even when Ross went solo, the control didn't stop. Gordy micromanaged her debut, chose her producers, and orchestrated nearly every move. On the surface, he was building a legend. But for Ross, it sometimes felt like she was being built into something that didn't fully belong to her. The real bitterness, though, may have stemmed from how much Ross had to sacrifice. She became the face of Motown, but it came at the cost of friendships, independence, and peace of mind. Ballard's exit from the Supremes wasn't graceful, and Wilson often spoke about feeling like an outsider in her own group. Ross, knowingly or not, was positioned above them, and some say she was complicit. But if she was, it wasn't without pressure. Gordy made her his star, but he also isolated her in that spotlight. What's tricky is that Ross has never outright trashed Gordy publicly. There's always been a tone of respect, maybe even love, but not without tension. In interviews, you can sense the restraint. She'll credit him for giving her a platform, but she won't dive into the murky waters of how he may have stifled her in the process. That silence says a lot. It's the kind of silence that feels like a grudge wrapped in decorum. There's no doubt Ross is proud of what she accomplished, but part of her legacy was written by a man who cared more about the outcome than the emotional cost. And that's where the resentment lies. Not because she didn't become a star, she did, but because she was never allowed to fully steer her own ship. Gordy built her up, yes, but he also cast a long shadow she spent decades trying to step out of. Diana Ross may admire Berry Gordy. She may appreciate the role he played. But forgiveness? That's a different story. Sometimes the people who help you rise are the same ones who keep you from flying too far. And Diana Ross? She's never been one to let someone else write her ending. Not even Berry Gordy. Is it the same pattern with the next star? Do you think people around her are on the wrong side, or she is? Marvin Gaye. For all the star power that Diana Ross and Marvin Gaye carried into a room, when they came together to record the Diana and Marvin album in the early 70s, the result wasn't the electric, effortless collaboration Motown had hoped for. It was tension wrapped in vinyl. On the surface, it should have been a Motown masterstroke. Diana, the polished diva, freshly launched into solo superstardom after dominating the charts with the Supremes, paired with Marvin, the soulful rebel whose voice was dripping with both seduction and social consciousness. The label, always looking for a new angle to sell familiar faces, saw dollar signs. But what they didn't account for was that Ross and Gay weren't just two stars. They were two very different forces, each orbiting their own creative universe, and neither particularly willing to bend for the other. And for Diana, that wasn't just inconvenient. It was infuriating. By the time the Diana and Marvin sessions began in 1972, Gay was already becoming harder and harder to work with. He was grieving the tragic loss of his singing partner and dear friend Tammy Terrell, deep in conflict with Motown over creative control, and growing increasingly erratic in both behavior and priorities. He'd show up to the studio late, or sometimes not at all, and when he did arrive, he often wanted to smoke weed, vibe out, and record at his own pace, his own way. For someone like Ross, who was known for her laser-sharp focus, tight schedule, and absolute demand for control over her image and output, this was less creative freedom and more an outright nightmare. She reportedly found him difficult, standoffish, and deeply unprofessional. Worse, she allegedly felt like he didn't take her seriously, as an artist or as a collaborator. To Diana, this wasn't just a bump in the road, it was a slap in the face. This was a woman who had fought her way up in a male-dominated industry where women, especially black women, were expected to smile, sing, and stay in their lane. Ross had shattered those expectations, becoming not just a singer, but a businesswoman, a movie star, and the crown jewel of Motown's empire. She valued discipline and control, and she expected the same from her peers. So when Gay rolled in with a cloud of smoke and a devil-may-care attitude, showing up late or sometimes refusing to sing with her in the same room, Diana reportedly saw it as more than artistic friction. She saw it as disrespect, and she never forgot it. The studio experience was so fractured that most of the album was recorded with the two of them singing separately, layered together in post-production to make it seem like they were a dynamic duo. But behind that glossy illusion was a relationship so cold it practically crystallized. Ross allegedly confided in friends and colleagues that Marvin's attitude felt dismissive, even condescending. She felt slighted, not just because of his behavior, but because of the way the industry, and perhaps Motown itself, seemed to excuse it as Marvin being Marvin. That kind of latitude was rarely extended to her. While she was expected to be polished, on time, and camera-ready, Marvin was indulged as the brooding genius. That double standard dug at her. She reportedly came out of that project feeling like she'd carried the weight of the collaboration, professionally and emotionally, while Marvin drifted through it on his own terms. Over the years, Ross never publicly trashed Gay, but those who knew her say the chill in her tone whenever his name came up was unmistakable. She didn't need to launch a tabloid war. Her silence spoke volumes. Diana Ross was the kind of woman who kept her composure, but she didn't forget. And she definitely didn't forgive easily when someone made her feel small in a space where she had fought so hard to stand tall. To her, Marvin wasn't just moody or misunderstood. He was rude, unreliable, and a reminder of how often powerful women were forced to absorb bad behavior from so-called tortured geniuses. So while fans may look back on Diana and Marvin as a beautiful Motown moment, for Ross, it was likely something far colder. A calculated compromise, a professional obligation, and a chapter she closed the minute the record dropped. Whitney Houston. In the world of music legends, few names carry the weight of Diana Ross and Whitney Houston. Both women are icons in their own right, each representing a different era of black excellence, glamour, and vocal talent in pop and R&B. But behind the dazzling lights and perfectly rehearsed public personas, there were always quiet murmurs, rumors of tension between the two. It was never a full-blown feud, no public takedowns or shade thrown in interviews, but there was an undercurrent of something more complicated: comparison, competition, and, allegedly, resentment. When Whitney Houston burst onto the scene in the mid-'80s, it felt like a cultural reset. She had the look, the voice, the pedigree, being the cousin of Dionne Warwick and goddaughter of Aretha Franklin, and most importantly, she had crossover appeal. Her voice was ethereal but powerful, technical but soulful, a perfect blend of pop polish and gospel roots. Critics and fans alike couldn't stop talking about her. And pretty soon, the press started calling her the next Diana Ross. That's where the trouble likely started. For Diana Ross, that label probably hit a nerve. After all, she was the Diana Ross, the blueprint. She had dominated the 60s and 70s as the glamorous frontwoman of the Supremes, and then as a solo star who broke barriers in music, film, and fashion. She wasn't just a singer. She was a cultural icon who demanded, and often received, the kind of respect normally reserved for royalty. So to see this young newcomer get branded as her successor, as if Ross's reign was over, may have felt like a slap in the face. While she never publicly addressed the comparisons, industry insiders and people close to the scene say the tension was palpable. There was also a deeper layer to the rivalry, an unspoken generational shift. Whitney Houston represented a new kind of star. She was younger, more vocally powerful, and came at a time when the music industry was changing fast. Her voice had the kind of range and control that made even other great singers pause. It wasn't just that Whitney was talented. She was transcendent. And while Ross had been known more for her style, poise, and image than raw vocal firepower, the emergence of Whitney as the total package may have felt threatening. Ross had set the standard for black female stardom in a white-dominated industry. But now someone else was rewriting that standard, and the world was watching. People close to Ross have hinted that she was never exactly warm toward Houston, even as Whitney made it clear she admired the older diva. Whitney grew up idolizing Diana. She even styled parts of her image after her, especially in the early years. But admiration doesn't always breed affection, especially when the younger star is quickly rising to a level that rivals or even surpasses the original. It's the kind of dynamic that doesn't require words to be felt, just the way a room shifts when they're both in it, or the quiet frostiness in shared circles. Friends and associates have said that Ross wasn't thrilled to be constantly compared to Whitney, and certainly didn't like the idea of being replaced. And then there's the element of pride. Diana Ross had spent decades commanding attention, carefully curating her image as untouchable and regal. She was known for her control, both on and off the stage. But Whitney? Whitney came in fresh, seemingly effortless, and with a voice that some said made Ross look almost lightweight by comparison. That kind of praise, when directed at someone new, can sting if you've spent your life being the one people praised. And though Ross never publicly disparaged Whitney, her silence often said more than words. There were no public duets, no warm-hearted tributes, no big sister mentorship vibes, just a cool distance. Yes, much of this is speculation, the kind that follows every pair of major stars in overlapping generations. But sometimes, silence speaks volumes. In a world where so much is staged, what doesn't happen often says more than what does. Whitney and Diana were rarely seen together, and their paths, though similar, remained stubbornly separate. Ross may have never said, "I'm jealous," but the quiet undercurrent of bitterness was something many in the industry picked up on. It wasn't full-on hate, but it wasn't sisterhood either. Whitney Houston carved her own place in history, not just as the next anything, but as a singular force. and Diana Ross retained her throne as a foundational figure in modern pop and R&B. But that unspoken rivalry, fueled by comparisons, media hype, and the natural insecurity that comes with being human in an industry obsessed with the next big thing, lingered in the background. It's a classic story in showbiz, the queen and the rising star, forever locked in a silent battle for legacy. Now that we've heard possible stars Ross could have rivaled with for a while, it would be fair to hear what the public thinks about her, too. Public feedback and criticisms on Diana Ross. For many, she's a symbol of elegance, ambition, and trailblazing success. But like any figure in the public eye for that long, Ross has also faced her fair share of criticism and public scrutiny. The feedback on her career and persona has ranged from glowing admiration to pointed critique, often reflecting changing social values, industry politics, and personal expectations of stardom. One of the most consistent themes in public praise for Diana Ross is her undeniable stage presence. Audiences and critics alike have marveled at her ability to command attention with just a glance or a gesture. Her voice, light, sweet, and instantly recognizable, may not have the range of some powerhouse vocalists, but its emotional expressiveness and unique tone set her apart. Fans often describe her as a natural performer, someone who brings glamour and soul together in a way that few can replicate. She was also a fashion icon, often setting trends with her glamorous gowns and signature look, which elevated her to a level of sophistication rarely seen in the pop and R&B world decades ago. That said, not all the public feedback has been favorable. A frequent criticism throughout her career is that Ross was perceived as diva-like or overly ambitious, especially during her time with the Supremes. Stories of her allegedly stepping on others to advance her own career, particularly the narrative that she was favored by Motown founder Berry Gordy and pushed ahead of her groupmates, have followed her for decades. Whether these stories are exaggerated or not, they've shaped public perception and led to conversations about ego, favoritism, and the price of ambition in the entertainment industry. Some have called her out for what they see as a lack of humility, particularly in comparison to other artists who appeared more down-to-earth or self-effacing. Another point of criticism is related to her vocal ability. While Ross has always had a distinct and emotionally expressive voice, detractors argue that it lacks the technical prowess of other soul and R&B greats like Aretha Franklin or Patti LaBelle. Some music purists have suggested that Ross's success had more to do with marketing and image than with pure talent. Of course, this point of view often fails to consider that artistry comes in many forms, and that Ross's ability to connect with an audience, her sense of timing, and her presence all contributed to her stardom in ways that go beyond vocal runs and octaves. Interestingly, Ross's attempts at breaking into film and broader pop culture have also brought mixed feedback. Her performance in Lady Sings the Blues was critically acclaimed and even earned her an Academy Award nomination. But her follow-up films didn't receive the same level of praise. Critics questioned whether she had the acting range to sustain a Hollywood career, and some argued that her attempts to cross over into multiple entertainment fields stretched her too thin. Still, many admire her for trying. In an industry that often pigeonholes black female performers, Ross's efforts to branch out were bold, and they paved the way for future artists to explore multiple creative outlets. In recent years, there's been something of a reappraisal of Diana Ross. The harsh criticisms have softened a bit, and more people are recognizing her cultural impact, especially in light of how the music industry treated women of color in her era. Younger fans and artists alike now cite her as a major influence, not just musically, but stylistically and personally. Beyoncé, for example, has acknowledged Ross as a guiding light. Many of the traits Ross was once criticized for, Her self-confidence, her control over her image, her unapologetic ambition are now seen as empowering and necessary in the fight for agency and respect in a still challenging industry. Public feedback on Diana Ross is deeply layered. She's been loved, criticized, admired, misunderstood, praised, and picked apart, often all at once. But what's undeniable is that she's left an indelible mark on music, fashion, and pop culture. Whether people see her as a dazzling diva, a cultural pioneer, or a controversial figure who shook up the status quo, Diana Ross continues to inspire conversation. And that's the hallmark of a true icon. Active at 81. One of the most exciting highlights of Ross's recent years has been her Symphonic Celebration Tour in 2025. This isn't just your typical concert. Ross is performing her classic hits backed by a full symphony orchestra, adding a lush, dramatic layer to songs that have defined entire eras of music. It's a fresh and sophisticated twist that brings new life to familiar favorites like Ain't No Mountain High Enough and I'm Coming Out. The tour has made stops in key cities across the UK, including Birmingham, Glasgow, Manchester, and London, drawing large crowds of devoted fans eager to see the Queen of Motown live once again. The orchestral arrangement highlights her timeless vocal style and showcases her ability to evolve artistically while honoring her roots. Fans and critics alike have praised the tour, often describing the experience as both nostalgic and thrilling. In 2025, Diana Ross made one of the most memorable red carpet appearances of the year at the Met Gala. Known for its extravagance and high fashion, the event was the perfect stage for Ross to show off her iconic style. She wore a breathtaking gown with an 18-foot train designed by Nigerian designer Ugo Mosier, making a striking statement. The gown was lavishly embellished with crystals and beads and featured a deeply personal touch, the embroidery of her children's and grandchildren's names, highlighting her pride and connection to family. This appearance reminded everyone that Ross isn't just a music legend but also a cultural icon who embraces fashion as an art form. Her daughter, actress Tracee Ellis Ross, was visibly proud and described her mom as a showstopper, a fitting description for the diva who has long been known for stealing the spotlight wherever she goes. You made it till the end. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more.